Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel, and today we have some top stories as well as breaking news as it revolves around Russia and Ukraine. Yahoo News. Russian troops move into eastern Ukraine, EU says, as fear of war grows. Russian troops have moved into eastern Ukraine, rumbling across the border into areas held by pro-Moscow rebels, the European Union's top diplomat said Tuesday. I wouldn't say that's a fully fledged invasion, but Russian troops are on Ukrainian soil, Joseph Borrell, the EU's foreign policy chief, said. Well, I think it's pretty fair to say that Russia has been there and has been building troops up for quite some time, very similar to what we saw in Crimea. So we go over here to the New York Times to kind of go over some of the bullet points that are being talked about and discussed, very similar to what we have talked about here before when it came to Crimea. Putin orders troops to separatist regions and recognizes their independence, of course. So Moscow orders troops to Ukraine's separatist regions after Putin recognizes their independence, very similar to what we saw with Crimea. The U.S. and other nations blast Russia at an Energy UN Security Council meeting. The U.S. said it will impose sanctions on the breakaway regions, but not for now on Russia, which is very interesting, an interesting choice. U.S. diplomatic staff relocated from Ukraine to Poland. Putin, in a fiery speech to Russians, says he will recognize the separatists in Ukraine. Again, very similar to what we saw in Crimea. Putin's speech came after a day of escalating choreographed action on Ukraine, so posturing and maneuvering, kind of to get the world's attention, of course, and they're doing a very good job of that. Why it matters that Russians just recognized Donetsk and Luhansk, which are the two nations or the two areas there in Ukraine that are currently the ones that Russia had talked about or Putin had talked about the other day, about those individuals wanting the Russians to come in. Very indicative and similar, echoing what happened in Crimea. Putin just put Kafka and Orwell to shame. World leaders condemn Putin. Now, I want to emphasize this last part here because we know here in the United States, when we have a Democrat president, there are certain things that we can completely count on happening when we have a Democrat president. That, of course, is that we'll have taxes will go up. I'm trying to say 5 different things at the same time. We know taxes will go up. We know there'll be economic hardship, and we know our adversaries will wrangle and jangle, posture, and intimidate the Democrat president, which is what we saw in 2014 when Putin went into Crimea with President Obama. He knew very well that Obama wasn't going to do anything. Now, that was 8 years ago. So Putin has had 8 years to prepare. So this isn't any mystery to him. And whatever sanctions and whatever actions the United States or NATO or other world leaders are going to do, Russia has already prepared for it. They've had 8 years to do so. So it's not really like a major big deal that Russia isn't aware of. You know, this isn't something that Russia is just doing spur of the moment. This isn't off the cuff like maybe perhaps a lot of leftists and Democrats and others here in the United States or parts of the world think, because of course their focus always is on the popularity and the significance of the particular world leader and whether or not that particular world leader is popular, very much like Joe Biden, because popularity is their standard. It is their highest measure, their highest value. And now that we're seeing that Russia is kind of mocking these leaders by saying that he's going to go in and reclaim some of these areas of Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk here, and of course he may have his own little assets in there to kind of bolster those numbers of the rebels or separatists in those regions to make it look as though it's kind of like a popular thing, very much identically to what Democrats often like to try to do. And so here, just at the beginning of this paragraph, the separatist enclaves claim all of Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions as their territory, but they control only about 1/3 of the area. It was not immediately clear whether Mr. Putin would recognize the enclaves in the de facto borders or would seek to expand them by force. So basically, as we just said, he probably has some level of assets in these areas, agitators, very much like activist assets here in the United States, very similar to BLM or Black Bloc and Antifa. So he's got these kind of groups there. And I'm not suggesting that these individuals are like BLM. I'm just saying as a illustration, a comparison contrast as to these types of individuals that are there. So that's kind of what Russia is going to claim. is that these individuals are in these regions and they want Russia to come in and, obviously reclaim what belongs to Russia. And then, of course, this couldn't be a better distraction for Joe Biden, whose approval is absolutely tanking. And we can see here on the, this is, of course, is a Real Clear Politics. I like to use them quite often because, of course, the aggregate, a very large aggregate that is, you can see his approval is only at 41.4 and his disapproval is at 52.9. So to me, in my opinion, what's going on there in Russia or Ukraine has been really kind of a benefit to Joe Biden to make him look as though he is strong, to make him look as though he is competent. But the world really knows that actually he is feckless and feeble and ineffectual, as we saw the disaster that happened in Afghanistan. And as we go here to Civex, and we can also see another breakdown of over 168,709 responses saying that Joe Biden's disapproval is at 56% and his approval is only at 34%. So we can clearly see that the United States at right now is at a very weak state under Biden. And of course, the thing is, we saw very similar activity under Obama, and Russia went into Crimea. And of course, this is not with us getting even close to discussing what's going on in China or what China may do under these particular circumstances. So once Russia decides to move in completely, which they may end up doing, because this is one of those very gradual things, boiling the frog in the pot. Very gradual, very slow. Russia's kind of putting their finger to the wind to see what other nations in the world are going to say, what they're going to do, what the maneuvering could possibly be, seeing what NATO is. And I want to emphasize here, too, that Russia is saying that they don't want Ukraine to get into NATO because, of course, then that would mean that NATO troops or even U.S. troops and European troops could be right at the border of Russia, and that to them is very unacceptable. So that's another kind of buffer that Russia is trying to create here. Very similar to why they wanted Crimea there in that particular region, so that enemies could not reach Russia. They'd have to go through certain points, like there through the straits there in Turkey, to get into that region and come into Russia from that direction. And then, of course, the same thing with Ukraine. Should it become a NATO state, that would allow, well, I was going to say foreign troops, but NATO and other nations' armies, as it were, to then be right there next door to Russia, which could be a huge problem for them, as you can imagine. So I'm interested to know what you guys think about this. How far will this escalate? Are you anticipating this to escalate even more? And where do you think it will go? And if you think that if Russia does do this, that China will also jump in, and whether Iran will also take advantage of this situation. I'd like to know your thoughts down there in the comments. I want to thank all of you guys, those of you, of course, on Rumble, Odyssey, and BitChute for your continued support, and all of you here on YouTube. That would be the channel icon appearing there right there on the screen, guys, that you can click on to subscribe, as well as notifications. And I will see you guys in the next video.